We're live. Greetings, Saber fans. Don't have any viewers. That's a problem when you take a gap. When you take a gap, you lose your viewership. But hopefully, some people will join in. But if not, we can always watch this thing after it publishes. But I wanted to talk about a couple things today. Number one is I know that the custom Saber shop standby is out of their NeoPixel adapters. These things, I have some. I ordered a bunch, and I know everybody's looking for solutions. I've seen some crazy solutions out there on the forums and Facebook groups lately. And, a lot of people, I imagine some of y'all know about these, but this is Dimitri Shtok's lit connectors. And this one, the diffuser's got a chip in it because I did a boo-boo there. But these lit connectors are still available. And the cool part about these lit connectors is they kind of give you some other options. And the lit connectors come with the blade end, and they also come with a guide. So when you're soldering in the pins, that you get them on how they're supposed to be oriented. But underneath that diffuser, here's the cool thing about the lit connectors, is there's little LEDs there in underneath the pins. So when you're wanting to build a saber that has a blade plug and you ignite it, you get the effects in the saber without having to use anything crazy in your blade plug. Now this one I have programmed for off behavior, so you see it fades in and out. It goes to red and then it fades out to black. So you can also program these to have off behavior as a separate blade, and then you can use a traditional blade plug, which stand by. I've got a traditional blade plug here. Yeah, these are pretty cool. They're not that new. They've been out for a while. So there's a traditional blade plug. I don't know if this is going to show up on video, but that's pretty awesome, isn't it? So that's one of my KR sabers. That's one of my flagships that was etched. It's installed. It's awesome. I'll show you all the chassis. Figured we'd talk about that one too anyway. But these, the Shtok connectors are awesome. There's the chassis on this one. I had to modify it a little bit. There's the Proffie sticking up, but these Shtok connectors are an option, while the custom Saber Shop's NeoPixel hilt connectors are out of stock. And that's another reason why, usually I'll stock up on these things. When they have them in stock, I always buy more than I need. So I have a bunch of custom Saber Shop NeoPixel connectors while they're going through this mess with China. This mess with China has really got supply lines screwed up. NeoPixel supply lines are screwed up. NeoPixel connectors are screwed up. A lot of the parts they need to build sabers are hosed up. But I just placed an order with the custom Saber Shop because I'm actually working on where'd you get them pin buttons on that saber? I got those from Robert Sotomayor. There's the button setup. I showed those on a previous video. They're pretty slick. They work well on these flagships. And we'll talk about the color changing away. But yeah, those pin buttons come from Robert Sotomayor. His last name is Sotomayor, Robert Sotomayor. He's a big chassis guy, sabersmith for Smuggler's Outpost sabers. So you can get the Smuggler's Outpost speakers, the 12 millimeter dual tactile button setups, and chassis. He sells chassis. In fact, that saber has a Sotomayor chassis in it. I liked his previous chassis for the flagships better, but You know, that chassis works fine. So sorry I took last week off, but you know, we got some bad medical news on the home front there, and was not a good night for me to go live last Monday. So we didn't. But I wanted to go live really quick this week just to get something out there because I know we haven't gone live in quite a bit. But you know, I'll start getting back to doing these things as often as I can on Mondays, you know, to field questions or whatever. But I've done some other work on some other sabers here recently. So this is a saber which is turned off right now. This is a saber that came to me from one of my big customers, and this one had it had prism in it, and I put a Proffie in it. And the weird part about it was it has this blinking amber LED in the chassis that he wanted to retain. So I swapped the Proffie in there and programmed the Proffie, and everything is golden on this saber now. There's still some font upgrades I'm doing, but oop. Huh. There it goes. Sorry about that. Kept going into color changing mode. The cool part about this saber is it's got a crystal chamber in it. Sometimes the crystal chamber is not that easy to take out. There's the crystal chamber. Huh. I changed the color of the blade because I went into color changing mode. Huh. I better change that back to traditional fire blade standby. Go into color changing mode. There you go. Now it's back to standard color changing. Put the back end back on. Bet I put that. Yep, I put it in backwards. That's why I was doing that. No wonder. There we go. I had the button thing in there backwards, but doing some work on that. Use a Proffie, and I have to say it was some. The Proffie actually soldering Proffie in is pretty simple. You know, the hardest part, you know, when I swapped out the prism to Proffie in this one was diagnosing the prism. You know, which wires were which. Of course, you can see a lot of them because you know it's where they're soldered on, and I know prism, so it wasn't that bad. But he did some weird things. The original installer did some weird things with accent LED wires. But once I got the accent LED wires figured out, I wrote a new config file to make that accent LED blink like it was with Prism. And, you know, now it's doing the same thing it did with Prism with Proffie, only it has smooth swing and color changing and everything else. So it's actually pretty awesome. But yeah, I mean, Proffie's pretty cool. Proffie's pretty sweet, and the new OS is, you know, pretty awesome. Cool thing about the new OS is, you know, you can go into color changing mode. Get this one back to red. And it does color changing to whatever blade style you use, which is pretty cool. That's a cool part of the new OS is, you know, with the color changing and the save state, makes installing these sabers a lot simpler. We were talking about that in my last YouTube live video, where, you know, I can set up the lightsabers with bank folders now. And if somebody wants to swap out font, they just go into that bank folder and take the old font out, put their new one in, and then ignite the saber, change colors to match your font, lock in the color. Can't figure out how to save it. So Michael, you have to add define save state in the top of your config file, and it'll say volume, blade color, and which font you last turned the saber power off on. So like if you had a kill key and you turned the saber off on font 5, you killed the power while it was on font 5. When you turn the saber back on, it will boot in font 5. So that's called save state. You have to put define save state in the top of your config. And if you do that, then that turns on all the save state functions. Now, the problem with that is once you define save state, it creates 3 INI files, INI files, on your SD card. And anytime you make changes to the config or to the SD card, you have to go in and delete all this stuff in all 3 of those INI files so that your changes take effect. That's the only negative side about, yeah. Thank you, Jen. I'm hoping to have a better one when you get all this vectorized or whatever, so then we can print them on plain black, and that way you don't have this square in the background. Jen's really annoyed with this square in the background on those, so we'll get them straightened out. So yeah, Michael, you just need to add on the very top of your config file where you have all the defines, you know, define volume, define clash sensitivity, define buttons. You just put that define up in the very top, and it's define save state. And if you can't find any information on that, it should be in the new manual on the open source Facebook page. So that's that. Another saber that I've messed around with. And this one is this is Mark 1 by Romans, and this saber is pretty awesome. This is the weapon of a Jedi. Now, I did not install this saber. This saber was installed, and the weathering on this saber was done by the Propagator, Tom Leach, and you know, the customer had it sent to me to combine it and shipping with his V2, then I'm still tweaking. So the V2 and this OK4 are going to go to this customer once I get done with it. But he wanted me to look at the config on this and see if I could do any improvements, and I did. I added some different algorithms in the
Vader's Jedi.
to turn on the accent swings.
Vader's assassin.
Lord Vader.
So I basically, Tom Leach, the Propagator, did a fantastic job on this saber, and I'm hoping that Tony will be able to see this when it's up there. But the weathering on this saber is, phenomenal. Thing looks awesome. Anything that Tom Leach does is usually awesome, and this saber was no exception. And I think I've just gone in and improved some of the blade styles and stuff like that. Made it just a little bit better than it was. And pretty proud of how that turned out. It's a very nice saber. But again, Tom Leach, the Proplicator, did the install. All I did was tweak the config a little bit, doing stuff that Tony likes on his sabers. And I'll be shipping both these to Tony. And right now it's kind of hard to get stuff to Tony because he's in Hong Kong. I think a Proffie NeoPixel 2-switch saber is pretty ambitious. But could you do that for your first build? Sure. Probably the NeoPixel doesn't make sabers harder to wire. Actually, wiring the saber for NeoPixel is a lot easier than the old LED modules were, like using a Tricree. The hard part about the NeoPixel sabers is building the blade, and there's a lot of art in blade building, and that's going to be your most challenging part of that build, is building your own blade. So if you could source your own NeoPixel blade from somewhere else, like Corbanth or whatever, and buy a NeoPixel blade that's already been built, then no, I don't think a 2-switch Proffie NeoPixel saber is too much to bite off. But just like with anything else, you need to develop your soldering skills before you start soldering on a soundboard. And the best way to practice is, learning how to join wires, and, get yourself some proto boards, some prototyping boards, and, learn how to solder in those prototyping boards. I think that's, about the best advice I can give you there. Learn how to solder really good first. And once you're comfortable with soldering, then, move on to building your saber. I think, 8 or 10 hours of practice on prototyping boards and, melting wires together and creating joints will go a long way toward making your install go a lot easier. And also, you need to make sure you have a good soldering station, like you see over my left shoulder here. A good temperature adjustable ESD safe soldering station is pretty important. You cannot do this with a soldering iron from the Home Depot or Lowe's. You can, but you're making your life a lot harder than it needs to be. Get a good soldering station, and you can get a good soldering station for 40 or 50 bucks. You go to Home Depot or Lowe's, you buy an iron, you're talking about 25 bucks for, their best iron at Lowe's. Go ahead and buy it right or buy it twice. That's a saying in the 501st Legion: buy it right or buy it twice, which I think is good advice. So no, I think you could knock that out, no problem. But the 3 sabers that I had that I just installed, you had both Ultra Sabers, the Ultra Saber Spectre and the Ultra Sabers Aeon V4 with the custom shroud and control box, and then the crossguard, the Corbanth crossguard with the KR upgrade kit. Those 3 are out the door. They're gone. So, right now, I know everybody's like, well, what are you doing now? And are you taking commissions? I'm not taking commissions right now, because right now, right behind me, I have a bathroom that I'm in the middle of remodeling. So pretty much all my spare time is going to be on finishing this house. And that bathroom was a big, huge piece of the work I have to do on my house so I can sell my house. So pretty much I got to finish that remodeling job in the bathroom and do some painting and some sheetrock work and paint the outside of the house and hopefully get my house on the market at the end of this month. So this month's going to be pretty crazy for me. But I do have 3 Graphlexes and 2 DV6s that I'm going to be building. 2 of the Graphlexes are spoken for, and 1 of the DV6s is spoken for. So I'll have 1 DV6 and 1 Graplex with Proffie. They'll both be NeoPixel. That'll be up for grabs, maybe at the end of April. It just depends. If there's nothing else I can do inside the house and I'm sitting around watching paint dry, then I'll work on lightsabers. But pretty much right now it's all work, work, work. I'm going to take tonight off because I was out of town over the weekend, and I'm going to go see Jen tonight. But the rest of the week I'll be working here in the house, not on lightsabers. So I'll be working on projects that are not lightsabers. Awesome, Twisted Wizardry. Glad you made it on live. I'm probably going to only be on for about 9 more minutes tonight because I got to go over and see Jen. We haven't seen each other for like 4 or 5 days because I was out of town last weekend. But, next week, hopefully we'll be back on normal for about an hour. And, I'm hoping that I'll have some cool stuff to show you guys. Maybe some progress on the Graplex chassis that I'm working on right now. Normally I start around 5:30 or 6:30 p.m. I think 6:30 is going to work better for the West Coast people and the Central people. I think really what works best is 8:30, but that's too late for me. So I think I'm going to, stick anytime between 5 and 7:30 until we get this dialed in. I would say 6:30 is going to be a happy medium, but it's going to be every Monday. And if you haven't liked my Facebook page, Megtooth Says Sabers on Facebook, if you like that page, every Monday I'll go on there in the afternoon and say, hey, we're doing a live video tonight, and say what time I'm doing it. And then usually about 30 minutes out from going live, I put a link on my Facebook post so you can get to the live stream if you want. But I've heard, basically we come on here and try to answer questions, and hopefully sometimes I can pick up cool stuff from you guys or some tips and tricks that you use. And I know some people have picked up some stuff from me. One thing I guess we could talk about tonight are forceps. First saber build, Proffie, Corbanth. Videos were useful. I'm super satisfied with how it came out. I just got to say thanks. So thanks, Ben. That's awesome to hear. I'm glad my videos helped you. The K4V2 is not an easy saber. I actually have one in my queue, and that's a tough build. So congrats on getting that thing working. But I wanted to, I guess, we'll throw a little tip and trick in here. So if y'all saw my install video, you saw I like these forceps. So these are some longer forceps, and these are some smaller ones. These forceps can come in handy because, like, when you're routing wires through the saber, you can reach into the hilt really deep and grab those wires and pull them out where you need to get them to where you're working on it. And these small ones help you hold wires while you're soldering. You could have one in helping hands and one in these while you're soldering. And that way your fingers aren't burning from holding that hot wire while you're soldering on it, if your other clip in the helping hands isn't working on. Yeah, King of the Hill pre-built blade is probably not a bad idea. Building a NeoPixel blade definitely has its challenges. And, I have a whole video on how I build my blades, and that video still holds fairly true. Pretty much everything I did in that video I'm still doing. I just got an order in from the custom saber shop today. I have blade stock. I have tips. I don't have NeoPixels because right now the NeoPixels that I like to use all come out of China. And right now all US supplies are wiped out because of coronavirus. So it's probably a good time for me to be working on the house with all these, all the supply lines have been interrupted because of coronavirus. That's why the stock markets are crashing, because you have, whole businesses that are dependent upon those supply lines from China. Kind of shows that maybe we need to be not so dependent upon China for everything when it cripples our economy. The large copper button. Now, are you talking about the funny? It's funny that you say that. Stand by. I'll show you a project that I have in queue. Oh, Lord. So I might have some suggestions for you because I have a similar project in queue. Look at what I got. This is for a buddy of mine. This is a MR Anakin, Master Replicas Anakin. So are you talking about the gold button that goes on the bottom here? Or are you talking about the Graphics button that goes up here? Because the gold button's this piece. You know, a lot of those sabers, they get worn. You can see the wear and tear on that one, how it looks like crap. You can actually order these from Ultra Sabers. Ultra Sabers sells these gold plastic buttons in their parts department. And that was a tip I actually got from Shamim when he was still installing sabers. So yeah, Ultra Sabers is your choice on that big bottom plastic piece. And they're all shiny, brand new, gold plated. They look great. You know, I've done, I don't know, 5 or 6 of these Anakin, the Skinny Flex Master Replicas conversions. You know, most of y'all know, but some of you may not, but I am in the 501st Legion, so I build a lot of Legion sabers. In fact, one of my Anakin conversions was at the premiere of The Rise of Skywalker with a member of the 501st Legion that worked for Disney, and she got an invite to The Rise of Skywalker. So that was a pretty proud moment for Megtooth sabers that, you know, one of my sabers was at the premiere, and it actually was a conversion that I did with one of these Anakins. So did you get the conversion kit from the custom saber shop? Because if you did, I can show you another trick. Do they have a matching gold small top button? No, no, they don't. But let me, I'll show you. I don't think I have one in here, but what I use is I use a Graphics 2.5 button bezel, and you can probably source one from the Graphics shop. But another thing you can do is paint your conversion kit, and you should paint it kind of like that. Number one, because these are exposed and they're supposed to be black. And then this is supposed to be chrome and this is supposed to be black. So when this is installed in the hilt, let me show you. I have to lock it down with the blade retention. So stand by, give me a second here. So when you paint that stuff black, then that way your Graphics recesses are black, and this is black here. Since there's really not really anything there on a Graphics, I think that is more accurate. That's why I do that. It's not the conversion kit that doesn't fit, it's the inside of your hilt. If you have a long Dremel attachment, you need to Dremel inside of your hilt. So all these holes and everything that are on your hilt, on the inside of those holes, because you can see, I'll take this blade retention out and I'll show you. Once you clean up the inside of the hilt, that conversion kit slides in and out. A lot of people think the conversion kit is not properly sized. That's not true. The problem is these holes, when they machine these holes in these master replicas, there's a lot of metal burrs and stuff around these holes. So you have to clean up all the holes on the inside. It's not the conversion kit that's the problem. It's the hilt, and it's because those metal burrs around all these holes on the inside of the hilt, the way they machine them. So you need to clean up the inside of your hilt with a Dremel, where all those holes come through. Here, 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 and here. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of burrs inside those holes on the master replicas. The conversion kit actually fits perfectly. The conversion kit is not your problem. It's inside the hilt. So that's another tip and trick on the master replicas for you guys, which that's a good one, Twisted Wizardry, since you're working on that. It's funny that you said you're working on, I'm working on the same hilt. It's in my queue. It's in my build queue right now, but it's way down the list. That one probably won't get built until I move into my new house because I don't need to finish it until August. And it was a totally non-functioning hilt. The blade was screwed. The electronics were all, the battery had exploded inside the hilt. So, he was really depressed about it. When he gets it back, he's going to poo because it's going to be NeoPixel. I think this will be my first MR NeoPixel conversion. Yeah, he's going to poo. It's going to be Proffie and NeoPixel. It's going to be awesome. Just hoping that the custom Saber shop will get their V6 chassis back in stock, which is kind of my go-to on these things because they're easy peasy Japanesey. Custom Saber shop stock's been depleted really bad, but that's what we got going there. Yeah, anybody else got any questions? Yeah, the only reason I say a Tri-Cree is easy, and there's nothing wrong with a Tri-Cree in-hilt LED. I mean, they still light up just fine. In fact, I've done most of these conversions I've done have been in-hilt Tri-Crees because the 501st Legion people want the battery to last longer, and certainly your battery's going to last longer with Tri-Cree than it will with NeoPixel. The reason NeoPixel is harder is particularly in the beginning when there weren't these sources where you can go and buy NeoPixel blades. In the beginning, the only way you could get a NeoPixel blade was to build one. And building your own NeoPixel blade, hey Bobby, building your own NeoPixel blade is can be a tough row to hoe. There's a lot of tutorials out there. I think the three big blade building tutorials are KR Sabers, Mad Cows, and Rob Petcouse from the Custom Saber Shop, and mine. And I think there's a lot of good information there, but I think if you build a blade the way Rob Petcouse showed, you're going to have some issues with diffusion and shadowing because he didn't use any cellophane or any other diffusion. He just put the strips in the foam and the foam in a trans white tube, and I was never able to get that combination to look satisfactory, especially not with 50/50 LEDs, which he used in there too. So that's why I caution people about building a NeoPixel Saber was, the actual installing a NeoPixel hilt adapter is easier to wire, especially if you do it my way. It's easier to wire than an in-hilt LED because an in-hilt LED, you got 3 crees in there you got to worry about. You got to worry about the resistors and calculating the resistors for each LED on the star. And then you got to worry about how you're running those wires into your board. But if you're using Proffie, NeoPixel is a lot easier to set up on Proffie. If you're going to use in-hilt LEDs, you may want to try to find a Nanobiscotti or a Prism to wire up. A Prism would be pretty cool, and you could probably get them cheap. I have a lot of Prisms I need to put on Facebook and sell right now, and Nanobiscottis and a lot of igniter boards. But a lot of those boards should be fairly cheap right now. You should be able to find them on Facebook. But I think a Prism or a Nanobiscotti, if you can find one, would be really good boards to begin with. And then once you do that, once you have success there, the Verso is even better. Genius. I forgot about Cal's Verso. The Verso's way better than Prism or Nanobiscotti. Forget I said those. The Verso. What am I doing? I totally forgot about Cal's Verso. I think you should have an easy time with the Verso. Take your time, learn how to solder, calculate the resistors you need for each of your LEDs with the forward voltage and the amps required. There's calculators on Custom Saber Shop's website where you can calculate those. And when you're calculating resistors, government close is the key, because the calculations never come out exactly. Like for red, I think technically you need like a 1 ohm resistor, but you know, in a 2-watt resistor, it's hard to find just a 1, but you can find a 1.2. So most people use 1.2 ohm resistors on a red LED and a 3.7 volt Saber. That's just an example. It's like these accent LEDs. I mean, you can use a resistor calculator, but for me, is a simple rule of thumb on an accent LED, whether it's red or amber. I'm running an 80 ohm resistor. If it's a blue or green, I'm using a 20 ohm resistor. On a main LED for your blade, for a tricree, red gets 1.2 ohm, blue and green get half an ohm. White, if it's FOC, I don't even put any resistor on it at all. But you need to make sure you use a resistor for any LED that's going to be on for part of the blade color. And the reason is, since you're using in-hilt LEDs, is an LED craves electricity and it just sucks and sucks and sucks, and it'll take all the electricity it can get. And the problem with I'll probably be selling them. It's not going to be anytime soon because right now I got to fix this house. But yeah, I need to sell a bunch of these boards. I have a crap ton of boards I need to sell. But an in-hilt LED is energy craved, and it'll sit there and keep soaking up energy until it burns itself out. So the reason we put a resistor on these LEDs, it keeps them out of that energy craving death cycle, and it limits the amount of electricity that they can suck in at one time. It limits the amount of amps on them. So adding resistors to your in-hilt LEDs is important to keep them out of that death spiral. You can limit the voltage with some of the boards, like Proffie. You can limit the voltage to the LEDs with the boards, especially because they use pulse width modulation. And with pulse width modulation, you can limit the voltage and amperage that's going to the LEDs, and that's kind of complicated. When you see PWM, that's pulse width modulation, and it's an electronic computer wizardry way of reducing voltage and amperage draw by modulating the width of the pulse of electricity. That's crazy. That's crazy talk. Pulse width modulation, PWM. 0.3 ohm, 1 watt for blue, and a 1 ohm, 2 watt for white. I don't know that you need a 1 ohm on white. You have to check that on the calculator. Are you using white for flash on clash? Because if you are, it's only going to be on when you get flash on clash. If you're using it for blade driving, then yeah, you need to put a resistor on it. But 1 ohm, 2 watt might be heavy. 1.1 gigawatts. Yeah, I would go look up the specs on that white LED and put those specs in the voltage calculator with 3.7 volts as your power source, and see what the calculator spits out. It seems to me that if the Neo strip has onboard resistors, one for each Neo should need resistors past the PCBs. So NeoPixels are different. So I was just talking about in-hilt LEDs, and I'm sorry, add me on, which I think is Richard. NeoPixels on a NeoPixel strip don't need those limiting LEDs, because I think they're kind of included inside the chips, inside the chipsets. So the only resistor on a NeoPixel blade is either going to be before your NeoPixel adapter or in the blade itself. On my NeoPixel blade, I use a resistor. You can use a 330 to 550 ohm resistor. I use SMDs on the blade side adapter. So all my blades have their resistors on. But now the resistor on a NeoPixel blade doesn't have the same function as a resistor on an in-hilt LED. A resistor on an in-hilt LED is designed to keep that, it's in the loop, it's in your circuit loop, to keep that circuit loop stable so that the LED doesn't eat more power than it can handle and burn itself out. That's the purpose of a resistor on an in-hill LED. On a NeoPixel data line, the purpose of that resistor is to smooth out that data signal, to clean it up. It does nothing to preserve the LED's life. That's not what the data line resistor is about. It's about smoothing out that data signal through resistance. That's what your resistor does on a NeoPixel strip. So the Proffie 2.2, for those of y'all that don't know, data line 1 already has a resistor on the soundboard. So technically, if you had a NeoPixel blade hooked to data line 1, you wouldn't even need a resistor in the blade, but if you had one, it wouldn't hurt. Frederick's tested those, I think, up to 10,000 ohm, and the data line still works even under, double resistance. So let's say like you had the onboard resistor, which is 470 ohms, and then you had a 500 ohm resistor in your blade, then, that would be 1,000 ohms total resistance. The data signal still gets through. If the Neo strip has onboard resistors, mine have one for each Neo. Those actually aren't resistors on the NeoPixel strips. Those are, hell, I can't remember the name. Well, I can't remember the name of that. I know what you're talking about. They look like little SMD resistors, but they're transistors. I'm pretty sure they're transistors that are on the NeoPixel strips. Totally different than what we're talking about here. Those are part of what turn the power on and off on the NeoPixels. Yeah, the only the only resistors you need to worry about in NeoPixels are on the data line. So as long as you have one in either the blade PCB or on the blade, you're golden. If you're using a Proffie 2.2 and you're running data line 1, you don't need a resistor in your blade, but I always put resistors in my blades, and if you have double resistors, it's not going to hurt your data signal. That's all you had success had me on with your, with your V2. That's, so awesome that your build finally has come together, and now I think you're tweaking your configs and your fonts and kind of learning how it all works. So that's huge that you had all that success on that saber. That was a very complicated saber for your first saber. That's what we were all worried about. You had a lot of complexity in that build, and you pulled it off. We had a lot of headaches along the way, but all those headaches along the way, I think, were huge learning experiences for you. I had an elementary school teacher, and when we used to have exams or tests, he never said, we have an exam today. He said, he goes, today we have an opportunity for excellence. And your V2, Richard, had multiple opportunities for excellence on it. And that's what everybody was worried about, was you had so much going on that there were so many places where you could have a breakdown. Well, you have NeoPixel PCBs too, so you certainly need those on your NeoPixel PCBs, especially, I believe your first NeoPixel PCB that's in before the thin neck, you had that wired separate data, so that certainly needs a resistor on it. And I still think that you should put a data line resistor on your NeoPixel blade. That way you could use your NeoPixel blade in a Prism saber or a Nano Biscotti saber that was NeoPixel. It just gives you more flexibility to go ahead and put that data line resistor in the blade PCB. Oh, Lord. I have one here. Stand by. So that's one of Dimitri's stocks there. Stand by. Let's get a simple custom saber shop blade PCB out here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is the blade PCB from the custom saber shop, and then on the back there's this little footprint, and I need a pointer. This little footprint here, these two small dots in between the three dots, that's your footprint for SMD resistor, an 0603 SMD resistor, and I use 330 ohm, 500 ohm, whatever I have on hand. It doesn't matter. You're not going to hurt your data signal by having dual resistors. So you could have the 470 ohm onboard resistor on the Proffie 2.2 and a 500 ohm resistor here, and your data signal will still get through clean. Well, no, no. Remember, the data signal on NeoPixel has jack to do with the amount of electricity going to the blades. All the electricity supplied to the blades is positive and negative. The only thing the data signal does is tell each individual LED in the strip what to do. So the data line has nothing to do with power supply. So if you use more resistance than, you know, look, in the very beginning, everybody was saying 470 ohm resistors, but 330 ohm works, 470 ohm works, 550 ohm works. And Frederick tested, because when Frederick put the onboard 470 ohm resistor on the Proffie 2.2, everyone asked him, well, I get that you're doing that, but won't that create problems with sabers that already have the resistor in the blade? And so Frederick went to the test bench and he started testing, and I think he tested up to 10,000 ohms resistance, and the data signal was still getting through. But the NeoPixels are as bright with 1,000 ohm resistance as they're going to be with 330 ohm resistance. Remember, the resistors on a NeoPixel blade are on the data line, and it's not to limit electricity to the NeoPixels. All it does is smooth out the data signal. So it has jack to do with NeoPixel brightness. The NeoPixel brightness is going to be all about how much power do you deliver to the positive and negative pads on your NeoPixel PCB and on your blade side PCB. If you're transferring full power there, you're going to have full bright blade. It doesn't matter whether you have a 300 ohm data line resistor or a 500 ohm data line resistor or 10,000. The blade's going to be the same brightness. The blade brightness on a NeoPixel saber is all about how successfully you deliver positive and negative voltage throughout your entire blade. It is not about the resistance on the data line. That has jack to do with the brightness of a NeoPixel blade. Nothing. Hope that answered that question clear. Hopefully that's about as clear as mud. You know, a lot of people, especially guys that were building sabers when in-hilt LEDs were on, are mistaken that data line resistor is the same as the resistor on an in-hilt LED, but they are completely two different things. They have two different functions. On an in-hilt LED, the resistor's purpose was limiting voltage and amperage to your LED so it didn't go into its death spiral. On a NeoPixel lightsaber, it's just to stabilize the data signal. Yes, twisted wizardry. When you put resistors on the power lines on an in-hilt LED, that's why you don't want to use too high of a ohm resistor, because you do lose brightness in that LED the higher resistor you use. Half an ohm should be fine for blues and greens. 1 ohm, 1.2 ohm for red. Yep. But you don't want to overdo those. You don't want to put like, 20 or 30 ohm resistors on there, because then you'll have a noticeable diminished brightness on an in-hilt LED. But on NeoPixels, when we're talking about the data signal resistor, totally different. You could use a 300 ohm to a 1,000 ohm resistor on that data line. 2 gauge single strand wire to positive, 22 gauge to negative, because that way I know I'm delivering as many amps as I can into the hilt side PCB. And likewise, I use 22 gauge from the blade side PCB onto the blade pads. That way I know I'm giving the electricity as big of a tunnel as I can possibly give it to travel through, so it has the maximum amperage to go through there. Amperage is the pressure of the water flow, and voltage is the rate of the water flow. The bigger of a hole you can put that water through, the more water is going to flow through the hole. That's why I use bigger wires. Yeah, you can use dual 26 gauge, dual 28 gauge. On a NeoPixel, I think if you use dual 28 gauge, you're going to lose too much volts and amps on a NeoPixel blade. If you're going to use dual, I would use dual 26s. And if you're going to use single wires, 22 gauge. 1 ohm, 2 watt for white. Well, if that's what the calculator's saying for white, then go with 1 ohm for white. I just typically on an in-hill LED, and it's going to be different because you're using Verso, but I guess the reason I never used a resistor on white is because like on Nano Biscotti or Prism, white wasn't typically used to drive the blade. It was only used for flash on clash and blaster blocks. So it was never really on full to need a resistor. But on the Verso, the way the color changing works, you're going to get full white because it's going to throw full power to that white LED. So you definitely want to use that appropriate resistor on your white. And if they're saying it's 1 ohm 2 watt, then go with 1 ohm 2 watt. Anywhere I have NeoPixels to assist on preventing overload? No. Richard, again, it has nothing to do with fade through all the NeoPixels and then back out on positive. There is no resistor in any of those power loops. The only resistor on NeoPixels is on data. And no, you don't need one on any NeoPixels you're running off data 1, but you would need data line resistors on data lines 2, 3, and 4. That much is correct. But that data line does not supply power to the NeoPixels. Power to the NeoPixels are supplied positive and negative. And in a direct current circuit, electricity runs from negative to positive. So it flows out of the negative terminal on your battery and it flows through all the things in the circuit that it's powering, and it's going to lose power along the blade. That's why if you build too long of a blade, the last few NeoPixels on a really long blade are going to be dimmer than the rest of the blade because you've lost so much power along the way. But once the power lights up all the LEDs on your NeoPixel blade, it comes back on positive to flow back into the battery. That is a NeoPixel circuit in simplified terms. I hope, Richard, you understood what I'm saying there. That the NeoPixel data line, the D line, is not a power line. It does not supply electricity to the NeoPixels. If you had a way just to throw data straight on the NeoPixels with just positive and negative hooked up, they would work just fine. And it doesn't take any volts at all to throw data through to the NeoPixels, and that's because data is not what's powering the NeoPixels. It's your positive and negative. Hopefully that answered everyone's questions. I don't want to get too instructory on electricity because electricity is kind of complicated. I mean, I think part of the reason that I was so good at installing is I understand DC circuits fairly well, and I'm a computer nerd, so writing the config files on Proffie was okay, and I built models. All that stuff combined, I'm good at installing lightsabers, and I can do metalwork, and I have metalworking tools. So all those skills kind of really help out when you're diving into these things. I'm glad I was able to answer some questions, and we went almost an hour, which I didn't want to do. And just wanted to tell everybody I'm working on, racing drones is an awesome intro into this stuff, as I did RC airplanes and slot cars. That's how I got into soldering. So, that is an awesome intro. Building racing drones and those first-person drones is crazy awesome way to go. But I'm going to go ahead and cut this off because I was supposed to be gone 24 minutes ago. I got to go see Jen Jen. Haven't seen her in 5 days, so I'm going to see Jen Jen. And Jen Jen's going to help me vectorize the logo and get that box off of there. And hopefully I'll have some merch for sale up on the YouTube channel. with my logos on it. Once we get this sorted out and straightened out, got to take this box off my logo. But at any rate, so I have some merch up there too, which would be pretty fun. Yeah, Twisted Wizardry. We'll see y'all next Monday. And next Monday, I'm going to shoot for 6:30 p.m. unless something else comes up. That gives me time the rest of the night to work on my house. Because pretty much for the rest of this month is going to be massive construction, painting, working on my house. But shoot for 6:30 p.m. next Monday unless something else comes up. But I'm going to go ahead and call it quits. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and hopefully I gave you some tips, and I certainly always pick up tips and stuff from y'all, and these things help me out a lot. And hopefully you learned something too. Awesome, Kyle. We'll see you guys later, and may the force be with you, or the dark side, as it were. See you guys next week.